Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a quick live stream session here. So tonight we're going to talk about cabling, and there's somebody asked me via email what the difference between cheap quality cables that you would get with like a DVD player or Blu-ray player or stereo equipment or a computer. And that was actually a spectacular question because there is quite a bit of difference between cable quality. So I think first off, we're going to start with the HDMI cables, which basically is just more of a fancier version of those component cables with the red, green, and blue. And basically, it's DisplayPort cable is kind of the same concept, and the HDMI cable is pretty much the same, but the difference between VGA and the component, like the red, green, and blue cables, where the VGA and red, green, and blue, they don't carry audio along with the picture in those cables. They only got the 3-strand of wires going through there compared to the 5-strand. And in some cases, the cheaper cabling, the ends that are crimped on there sometimes aren't as hefty as the more expensive, and sometimes even the more expensive cabling has a protective shield around the wires so that it doesn't pick up any electrical interferences or magnetic or interference from other cables. So that's also something to put into factor. And yes, a lot of your cables that you see at Walmart and Office Depot or Staples or Best Buy, some of them you spend up to $50-$60 for a 10-foot, but a lot of times you can do better on Amazon when you're buying cables. Or if you go to yard sales, a lot of times you can pick up cables for $1 or $2. And sometimes you can even buy a bundle of them for that. So would I advise spending $50-$60 for an HDMI cable? Why don't we Google? I'll go to Amazon real quick here, and we'll HDMI. I have to say, I like the HDMI cable. I think it's really a spectacular piece of technology where you don't have to have multiple cables just to get the video and audio in one. The less cables, the better, in my opinion. So, and on Amazon, you can buy the Amazon Basics brand. I know Amazon's not paying me to promote. I just happen to buy cables at different times and try different ones from cheap to expensive just to kind of get a feel for what's when you're in the business of doing computers and in the business of selling stuff, you want to be able to tell your customers exactly what the difference between this and this other product, or because if you're selling something and you can't tell your customer the difference between it, you don't look very good when you can't. But then again, when you're explaining stuff to a customer, you don't want to go over their heads with it, but you want to explain it in such a way where they understand what they're getting, and you want them to get a good deal, and they want to get a good deal, and they want to walk away feeling I got a good product today, and I learned something new. And the thing is, when you're explaining it to them, you don't want to make them sound like they're not as knowledgeable about it, but you just educate them. And then with the HDMI cables, there's also different sizing and different, because you also have HDMI to USB-C. I actually haven't messed with those cables personally, but those are theoretically for, actually those are for some certain lines of smartphones, like the Samsung and LGs and Motorola's, and then they have the HDMI. The only cables that I've never actually have used are the high-speed cables, but I'm thinking the gauge of wire is slightly larger, just to compensate for the streaming of 3D or 4K pictures. It's like trying to use a 16 gauge extension cord on a 20 amp circular saw. That circular saw is going to draw more amperage than the extension. So let's say you got a 20 amp saw and you only got a 13 amp extension cord. That extension cord is going to get awfully hot. And it's okay, maybe that was a bad example, but you kind of get the gist. It's like trying to use a coaxial cable. Okay, that's a bad example as well. Okay, it's like trying to watch a Blu-ray movie instead of using HDMI and only using the red, yellow, and white component cable or composite cables, and basically your video quality is not going to be as high, but it still gets the job done. But usually most people don't even use the red, white, and yellow cables anymore these days. And even a lot of your stereo component systems use HDMI cables for a lot of like the CD players and most of your amps nowadays, you still have the combination of using the analog art AV hookups like the red, whites, and then you have your HDMI but not to get off topic here, we're going to get back to the different cabling. And so basically, we'll go under the $25 range. So typically, with a high-speed Ethernet cable, or not Ethernet, I mean HDMI cable. So each end has gold-plated plugs on there. And then basically, typically a high-speed Ethernet cable can carry up to 18 gigabits per second. So that's actually pretty good, in my opinion, and plus theoretically, you can actually use it as an Ethernet, but I don't know. To be completely honest, that part of the theory, I have not really tested it as that aspect of the cable. I've only used them for video and audio purposes. And even And I have to admit, even the DisplayPort end of the HDMI cable, that I'm quite impressed with how that works as well. The only computer that I'm currently using that uses DisplayPort is my buildings and grounds computer over at my place of employment. Those two monitors are hooked up on DisplayPort, and I have to say it works a lot better. You get a more crisper picture. But still, the VGA, and there's, in my opinion, the VGA still looks decent, in my opinion. And even the digital video interface, which is the white cabling, that's the white one. That looks decent, as long as you got a decent graphics card to back it up. But preferably HDMI is the way to go, and DisplayPort is the way to go in today's technology compared to the VGA. And a lot of computers are getting away from using the older display technologies. There's some computers you buy that you can still use VGA cables, but a lot of them have HDMI as a standard option. A lot of your slimline computers, like your slimline Pavilions and the Dell Inspirons and the Acer Aspires, and a lot of them have HDMI on there, because a lot of those computers are kind of geared towards people using them as like media center computers and streaming TV shows and stuff. So that's what you can expect out of those computers. But so we're gonna move along. So typically back in like the early 90s, that's when the trend of the composite cable started coming out, like with the yellow, red, and white. And even a lot of your gaming consoles, like your PlayStations and your Wii's and your Xboxes and a lot of your Nintendo products used the composite cables. But even now, a lot of those consoles are starting to switch over to HDMI, and a lot of your TVs now, I think the technology behind how like LG and Samsung, where you can combine a component and composite port into one. It amazes me where the technology and televisions have come a long ways with even the amount of ports that you get. Most people are familiar with the old style cathode tube TVs from 20 years ago, where you had two component or composite video in, and everybody thought that was great for the time. But now you have so many different options out there with TVs you can pick out. You got your 4K, 8K is starting to become a big trend, and you can still buy 1080 pixel TVs, but even 1080 pixel TVs are kind of becoming a thing of the past, where you put a 1080 pixel TV next to a 4K, and with the 4K, the way that the graphics look on there, and the way that it processes, like if you put like the nature channel on there, it's just that the color is so vibrant, and it just pops compared to, and even the whole technology of And basically, the kind of the main scientific principle behind the colors red, green, and blue. It's. I will make another video on the history of that at some point in time, on how it processes that. But I'd have to study a little bit up on it first, because it's been quite a while since I've actually talked about cathode ray tube TVs. And but next topic that we're going to get into is Ethernet and fiber optic cables. So Ethernet cables, typically on an average network, like in a small infrastructure like this office here, for instance, I had somebody ask me the other day, actually I think that was the landlord, his kids are like, are you ever going to go fiber optic in here? And I'm like, one, it's kind of expensive, and two, for what I'm doing, the copper category 5 cable works just fine. And with running category 5 cables, so the maximum that you can run a category 5 cable is 384 feet. And that's without running a repeater in between. Anything longer than that, you need a repeater. Basically, most like home networks, you would never need to put a repeater or an amplifier. Okay, let's see what we got here. So I like the movie Ratatouille. I've seen it when it was on cable a couple of years ago, but other than that, I haven't seen it recently. But so I thought it was kind of interesting to watch. So we'll get back to the cabling. And then usually a lot of your, it also depends on your router. Because typically Ethernet cable, you got your category 5, you got your 5E, and you got category 6, you get 6E. I'll be honest, I'm still using 5E here in the office. It's not shielded, but how I have the cabling laid out, I don't have any electrical interferences in between the cables, so I don't have to worry about the performance dropping. And I'm still using an old Cisco Linksys switch from 2004. And typically on a network, you run between 10 and 100 megabits. And in some instances, if you have a better router from your service provider, or if you have your own that you bought like from Walmart or Best Buy, a lot of them offer gigabit speeds. And some of them are even up to, you can even buy 10 gigabit routers now. And you can even buy switches out there that run on 10 gigabits, but at a minimum, with a 10 gigabit router, you'd want at least the minimum of category 6 SE cabling. And what's nice about that is, with that 6E, is the wires are a little bit thicker so that you can handle, so that your voltage, so that you can get your information flowing through a little bit faster. And you also got like a shielding around the cable so that you don't pick up any electrical interferences, or because like in an office building nowadays, you got your drop ceiling, and you got fluorescent lighting above. And it's not the T12 light bulbs themselves, but it's the electronic ballasts that really do a number on the category 5 cables. So a lot of times my recommendation is, if for when running those cables in an instance like that, some people just like to run the cables over the top of the lights, but you don't want to do that. You want to anchor them either to the steel beams up there or girders, or sometimes what you can do, you got like a concrete wall on the side there, you just buy yourself some electrical clamps, or not clamps, but electrical brackets, and you can buy yourself some 1.25 inch, or 2-inch, 2.5 inch in diameter PVC piping. Get yourself, if you got a bandsaw handy and a lot of space, build yourself a guide on both sides of the blade, so that when you're running it through there, that you get a persistent cut, and then you cut it in half, and then you take a file the edges so that it doesn't cut, and then after that, then you just take a pocket knife like this, and you just put the blade out, and then you just kind of go down the edges and smooth it out even more. That way you don't nick your wires and going through. So, and in some instances, if you can't get a whole pipe up there, what you do is you cut it in sections, and then how you anchor is you just drill a hole through the middle. You get it in place, drill your hole, and then you run some bolts through there to hold it up there. It's quite clever. It works, and it only costs you probably about $50. I'm not talking $25 a section of piping, but you can buy quite a few 8-foot lengths for less than $5 a pipe. So you can get quite a ways, and even the electrical brackets, you can get a bag of them for like $5. So that's pretty much what I did here in the office, but I didn't quite do it as elaborate as I explained. But you also have to access. So like in a house, for instance, let's say that you wanted to run Ethernet cables around. So let's say that you had an older house and it had chicken wire style plaster and lat walls, and you didn't, or if you're not brave enough to tackle running the cables through your house, a lot of like Netgear and Linksys and D-Link and TP-Link, they make Powerline and Ethernet adapters where on one end by the router you just plug in. And how that works is the two adapters, you use your existing electrical outlets in your house to transfer the signal where the one adapter talks to the other. So then you run your power line adapter to whatever device that you want to run that's far away from your router. And I had my doubts about them, but actually they work quite quite well for carrying the cables or the signal. And even a lot of internet service providers still use Category 5 cables. I know if mine currently uses, basically, I got a satellite dish on the balcony here. It's not my balcony, but it's the balcony upstairs on this building, and I got a Category 5 cable running down into the basement and then up to the floor here to the router on the shelf. And basically, I kind of like to see fiber optic become more of a thing. I know like AT&T uses a TDS service providers use fiber optic. Fiber optic is a very neat technology. Instead of that electric current going through the line, you have like it's more of a light emitting technology. And the transfer speeds on a fiber optic cable are 100 times faster than electrical current going through a Category 5 cable. Is it a cheap option? Not really. But it is something that a person can look into. Do a lot of houses have fiber optic running through their walls? I wouldn't think so. But I'm sure a lot of your office complexes uses fiber optic. Schools, hospitals, colleges, businesses, companies, especially those that are multimedia companies, because when you're transferring like video data and audio files and stuff, you want to, with fiber optic, your network infrastructure is fast enough that you can transfer that stuff instantaneously and not slow down your whole network. And I don't have a lot of major experience with fiber optic, but after learning about it and reading up on it, you kind of get a grasp on how it works. Fiber optic technology has been around for a very long time. And basically, fiber optic, I'm sure most of you have seen out there Christmas decorations or Halloween decorations that have like the fiber optics on the end where it changes different colors or fiber optic trees. And that's basically the same concept as a fiber optic cable for transferring internet data or network traffic. That's basically the same kind of cabling that they use for that. Okay, we're gonna read another comment here. Ratatouille is a masterpiece. Technically, it is. It was. I know when I saw it on TV at the time, I thought that was. Unfortunately, I don't have cable anymore, so I don't get access to a lot of new modern movies. But cable is not cut out for everybody, and I was never impressed with paying hundreds of dollars a month for cable. And even basic cables got ripped off in a way. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I probably could have conducted this a little bit better, but we do things my way around here, and tomorrow, sometime tomorrow during the day, we're gonna get back to that custom built computer. We're gonna tear that apart, take all the old stuff out, get it ready for the new installation. The only thing I have to do is order the memory, because the board that's in there now is a DDR3 board, and the new board that's coming is a DDR4. And you would think Amazon would do a better job of descripting what exact memory goes with what boards. So I'll kind of give you a quick status update on my financial. Since I don't have to put new hard drives or any new CD-ROM drives in or come up with a new case. Basically, my costs for building a computer is around $750. So I can't complain there. Actually, $750 is cheap in my opinion. Others, they might think that's a ripoff, but you got to make a little something off of doing the. You can't do everything pro bono. And a lot of the parts that I ordered, I got them through Prime. And when you do stuff Cyber Monday, okay, I miss Cyber Monday on that one anyway, but when you do Prime in that, a lot of times you can get good deals. And the motherboard I ordered, you also got, if you ordered a certain option or if you ordered a certain board, you also got a processor and a cooler and a cooling package or heatsink and fan to go along with it, plus other options. And then I had to restock up on thermal paste for this job. So it should be a very exciting video, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to be excited to see, because part of it is, well, we'll save the excitement for when it comes. Doesn't pay to get all excited now. So God bless everybody. Take care and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow.